This is House Planning Help episode 138. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Alongside this, my personal goal is still to create an energy efficient home. Originally, I wanted to do this before I turned 40, which is just a couple of weeks away. And in this session, I'm chatting to Nick Grant from Elemental Solutions and Charles Grylls from Dempsey DeCourcy Architects. We're talking about integrated design. What is it? Why is it suited to self-build? Perhaps you're tackling a Passivhaus project. And how do we make it work in practice? All the collaboration, we'll get some tips on that too. Just got back from the AECB conference. This is the Sustainable Building Association, a great organisation, and they held their conference this year at the Enterprise Centre. I'd actually visited it during construction, so it was lovely to have an excuse to go back and to see the completed building at the University of East Anglia. Archetype, I'm a big fan of them. Morgan Sindel did a great job, and it's just so interesting to hear the journey of this building. So I thought I'd just give you a couple of takeaways. One of them is actually from Fergus Rolfe from Adapt Low Carbon Group, just reflecting this from the university side. And that is that he took us on this journey of how the university were constantly striving each time they had to create another building to make it better than the last. And I think it's this that has really delivered this fantastic building, that they were always striving for. What's the next step? How can we improve on what we've done before? And it's just so interesting to see all of these buildings when it's lined up on a PowerPoint presentation. Also, I thought, I don't know whether this is Archetype's typical approach, but they put together a materials map when they first work out, well, we're going to be doing something in Norwich at UEA, what's available to us in the local area. Maybe next time I chat to someone from Archetype, I'm going to ask how they actually do this. How do you know what an area has to offer? And that, I suppose, might have led to one of the building's most distinctive features. It's thatch clad. Thatch is certainly not something that's used that much on new buildings, and not in this lovely contemporary way too. So that's a very interesting idea. And even Thetford Forest was not too far away, and they wanted to use timber from there. Some of the journey of actually discovering, well, if we want to use timber from there, because it does produce timber, it's generally low-grade products like fencing posts, and to try and get that into the building, I just thought the story was fascinating. And one more point that I remember from the whole discussion was a period of reflection. I like that term and the way that they brought that in. We hear this time and again. I don't think we can hear this enough when you are in your early stages of forming the building and it was just getting too complicated. Perhaps it was going over budget too. So they needed to step back. What do we really need? How can we simplify this? And often doing that value engineering in that first part, those early stages, it just becomes a much, much better building. And I loved heading around there. So well done. Just giving you an example of one of the things that perhaps they could have put in a certain flooring and made it different. But what they decided was, well, we need this concrete slab. I think it might have been for structural reasons. So why don't we just make that the flooring? And that they polished it up, which might be a slightly more expensive way of doing it, but it's going to last for years and years and years. And it's such a nice surface. I was so amazed that that's actually just the concrete there. One more thing before I move on, and that is that I bumped into a hub member. So hi to John Marshall. It's great that when we're at a conference or something like this, I get to have that quality chat, where you sit down and I just get to hear all about what John's doing and the fact that he signed up to the hub and he's giving me feedback too. So John, really appreciated that. Thanks for lending me your iPhone charger as well, because I suddenly realised I'd gone to this conference. My wife had said, you will take your iPhone charger. Yes, please remind me before I leave. And of course I left without the iPhone charger. To business then. Our featured interview today is on the topic of integrated design and collaboration. Nick Grant from Elemental Solutions. He returns to the podcast. We've chatted to him in episode 111 on value engineering. If you're someone that term just sort of sends a shiver down your back, go back and listen to that, because Nick has some really interesting things to say there. And we're also introducing Charles Grylls to the podcast from Dempsey DeCourcy Architects. And as we haven't spoken to Charles before, I asked him to tell me a little bit about his background and then lead into today's topic.
My name's Charles Grylls and I'm an architect in Ross-on-Wye, and I've been working with Nick and the rest of our design team for about 5 years now on a variety of Passivhaus projects, retrofit and new build. So, and the rest of the team, that's Nick Grant, Alan Clark, Alan Pearce and Mike Whitfield, the contractor. So Alan Clark is the services engineer, Alan Pearce is the structural engineer, and Nick is Passivhaus consultant.
Why is this topic something that's close to your heart, Nick?
I think what for me is, as I was talking about when you interviewed me before, a lot of my experience goes back to industry, and there was a big sort of split between management and shop floor and so on. And I see that happening in the construction industry, where traditionally the architect draws something and then the engineer has to try and make it stand up, and then the builder has to try and build it. And I think I'm much more attracted to the idea of people really working together. So everyone's chipping in, and you're looking to the builder. You're looking to them for advice, how it's buildable. You're looking to the client. It's just everyone working together. It's a much flatter, non-hierarchical thing. It's not designed by committee. It is, it's a much more satisfying way of working, I think.
How long has it taken to get to this point?
In terms of our integrated design approach, I think we started off pretty much straight away, but we just, I think, took a few weeks just to get, not ground rules, but just to get understanding what somebody like Mike Whitfield would do as a contractor, what the engineer would bring in terms of designing to Passivhaus standards, just in terms of things like eliminating cold bridges and reducing the amount of structure in walls without getting too technical. So I think there's over one project which we did in Galway for a Passivhaus, which is in Herefordshire. Yeah, so I think it's just that first project, and that led on to the next project and next project. So,
is this about the people as much as the process?
Yeah, no, I think so. It's definitely, and we're a bunch of friends. I know it's often not the best thing to work with your friends. That can be a recipe for disaster, but we get on well and we respect each other. That's not always possible. So, we've done other projects where we've had to put a team together from scratch. But again, it's the same sort of principle. We get the contractor in early on, try and find a local builder people are happy with, not going out to competitive tender, design it, and then get people to put in prices and go with the cheapest or the second cheapest. For a self-build or a small project, it's much better if you can find someone you trust, speak to their previous clients, look at their projects, and just agree a way to work forward. And whether it's working for there's different methods. I'm not a contract specialist, but different ways of working that out. But that needs sorting at an early stage.
There must have been a period of forming the team, though, and getting it together and knowing who's best. You make it sound as if it was just like this straight off. So for other people who are trying to get a good team together, what advice would you give them?
I suppose from our personal point of view, we'd worked with Mike Whitfield for a long time before we met. We did work together. But because we worked as archetype, we knew of him, and we knew of Nick Grant, who'd worked with archetype quite a lot. So there were already connections in place. So I think that's just something that's been there, really. So if we went out, I suppose if we're starting fresh, I think usually word of mouth, and we'd probably go to somebody like who's done a Passivhaus and ask them who's done it. I think it's quite simple. And maybe, I think word of mouth is usually quite good, and you see good projects if you're starting from afresh, but we'd had a working relationship for 15 years or so.
Can we talk about a traditional process of how you would bring the team together from architect, builder, so forth, and to what you're suggesting as an integrated design process?
You have to talk to Charles, because he's a proper architect, about what the normal way of doing things is. But my experience on the outside, I see lots of different ways. So I get involved as a Passivhaus consultant, and I see sometimes something's been drawn, it's got planning, and then we have to then solve the energy problems and overheating problems, and then we have to then try and find someone who can build it, and then we find it's over budget, and then so this is the sort of, that seems to be quite common. So that's the bit we wanted to avoid. So this is just, we've kind of fallen into it. I think we've all known each other. I mean, Mike helped with that, building our house a long time ago. Alan Pearce, structural engineer on that, and we wanted to do some things very differently. He didn't balk at that. If you're just thinking this is a one-off Passivhaus or one-off low energy building, then that's not really, it's not worth investing the time and effort in learning. So people have got to see this is a direction they want to go. I think that's key.
Charles, the traditional route then, take us through that.
In terms of a traditional contract, so you'd start off with a client and an architect working through a process of design from concept to develop design, and then that would go in for planning, and then usually you go to tender once you've got planning. And then, so you basically, you're going to go quite a long way down the process of design without talking to a contractor. And especially in terms of Passivhaus, where it really needs an integrated approach all the way through, it can be a little bit risky because you'll get to a point and I think with our experience, we probably wouldn't make any mistakes, but I think if you were just starting this process and working with a builder that hadn't worked on passive houses before, I think it's just a risk in terms of cost control and quality control and just putting it together really on site. I think you just, with a negotiated tender, it's still a traditional route, the negotiated tender. So it's, when you say traditional or non-traditional, but a negotiated tender would be a traditional route to go down as well. We just find that that's less risky. I think in terms of competitive pricing, we've found that people that don't know Passive House will go either with a low price because they don't understand what they're going to have to build, or they go in and price it for a risk and so overprice it. So it's just negotiating with somebody who knows how to do it. Everybody knows where they are and what they can manage in terms of expectations.
And how is it that the system is set up like this? Why did it happen? It makes sense in some ways to think that you would do this as an integrated team, but clearly it's always just started with that design and then gone out to tender.
I suppose if you're an architect, it's probably easier just to design things and take it's more of a risk for the client that they'd have to pay, and then you get to this thing of value engineering in inverted commas where you're chopping things out, which I don't know. I think it's just that traditional way of doing things in competitive tendering, but you wouldn't usually go for competitive tendering until you got all the detail ready. But then you can two-stage tender, can't you, with there's not as much detail, then more detail. But when you say how we've got to this point, but I think there's always been this negotiated tender which is in there. So I think it's always been part of the process. So I think it's just different routes and competition and just getting competitive tenders, but we'd just go for negotiated tenders.
When we're going down this route then of integrated design, you, Nick, have told me that it lends itself very well for self-build. So can you explain that a little bit, and also the communication side, because it flows much better, doesn't it, in this way?
Yeah, I mean, self-build on any small projects that we do see sometimes, especially if someone's in the profession and they're doing a one-off build, they'll go through as if it was a school they were building or some very large project, and they'll go through the tender package and so on. And some smaller builders who'll be completely capable and brilliant at the job. You just need someone, they don't need to know anything about Passive House, they just need to care. They just need to do stuff neatly and stack bricks neatly or nail wood together neatly. That's all you got to do, and just care about what you're doing. And some of the smaller builders who are great at that, they won't have a department that is specifically doing the tender and then looking at extras and all this. So they'll happily turn up and do the job and they'll work for a fair price. But in terms of trying to win jobs in that way that bigger companies do, they're really at a disadvantage. So if you can find a small builder who you get on with and you can speak to previous clients, and I think you'll get a cheaper, better job. That's my, and I think there's ironically less risk. My partner, Sheila, her dad was a builder, long retired now, although he still does stuff. I don't think he said he'd never done a quote in his life, and had some people move to their village in Norfolk from London. They asked for a quote for a job, and he said he didn't do quotes, but if they didn't like what he did, he don't pay him. And you've got to be good to do that, because you do one duff job or you charge too much, you'll never work again. Word gets around the village. But people, there's a sort of mistrust, and it seems strange to sort of trust someone that much to go for this, this way of working, but it actually works out better for the client and better for everyone. But there's an element of trusting each other.
Your team, obviously, you've done a few projects together, and I know that if I lived down here, it would be a very easy thing to buy into that. But somewhere else in the country, how would you go about it then? Find this local builder? You want someone with some Passive House experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need enough people. You don't need everyone to have done Passive House, but you need someone who's willing to lead that and know what. Let's say this applies not just Passive House, it's anything you want to do. It's about quality, really. So someone who can keep a handle on that. And then just people who care. That's the key thing. So yeah, you'll have to get it. If it's your job, so say you're an architect or a Passive House consultant, whatever it is, it's going to be very useful for you to try and develop that expertise in your area, particularly for smaller jobs. For bigger jobs, it's always going to be a different contractor, it's going to be a different team, and that's a different game. But for self-build, small housing projects, you somehow getting that group of people together is a way to go. It's what people do, whether it's whatever you do, if you're keeping chickens or whatever, you'll make the contacts, you'll know where to get your chicken feed, you'll know who does this, that and the other. It's the same sort of thing. It's getting that network.
Can you talk us through the communication side of this when you're working as a team, how you do that with integrated design?
Well, I think nowadays, because everybody's internet and email proficient, I think this is going to be for most people now that we do quite a lot of work just emailing PDF drawings out. So everybody's always copied in. We don't usually have to do a joint. Sometimes we can use joint Dropbox type folders. So we can have joint folders for consultants' information, so we can keep checking and cross-checking. And everybody has a open and immediate response to information that goes out.
Because that's the other thing, you could say, oh, have a look at this, but you need to know that they've had a look at it.
Exactly, and the client as well. Usually most clients are going to be email proficient and connected up. So, yeah, right through, I think we can always cross-check and evaluate everything that's going on. So, and that's from, I can send real simple sketches out to Mike even before we even got a commission. So it's always, we can always start from the right foot and finish on the right foot. And we do a little bit of video conferencing now again. I think we've all got that FaceTime connectivity. So if it really is serious, we can... we don't have to put our trousers on usually. We can just from the waist up, we can communicate quite easily.
Anything else on communication?
Yeah, I think also just, although it's good communication, it's not superfluous. We don't sit around design team meetings with everybody there, which happens on bigger projects. And I think often there's too much of that on bigger projects. You've got the landscape architect sat through 4 hours of discussion about fire regulations, which ended up taking a lot of time up. So there's the informal, and also separating out what is focus. So you get on site, the builder's busy, bang, 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 we solve this problem, quick sketch, sorted, go away, send the drawing. So there's not loads of time spent in meetings, but then we'll chew the fat down the pub and we'll sketch out ideas, and it's non-productive time. We're doing it for fun. It can drag on. We can be silly. We can fool around. And when we've had enough, we can stop. But when you've got an actual meeting and work on site stops, we keep that very focused. And Charles is great with providing the communication needed, thinking through the sequencing, doing a lot of the builders thinking for them, having discussed with them the issues, and then trying to come up with solutions so that when they're on site, everything goes together very quickly and works very well. And if it doesn't go very well, we get the feedback down the pub, spend a bit of time, because we're going to do it time and time again. If it's just one project, you can't be doing that. You can't be spending ages trying to work out how this tricky corner detail went. This is one example we had. But if you know you're going to be using that many times again, it's worth putting in a couple of hours up front to make it much easier the next time. And the same with the drawings. Charles uses it's 2D CAD, a 3D CAD, but also little SketchUp illustrations, sometimes very handy. The builder has an A3 drawing. There's the proper dimension drawings, but sometimes a little 3D visual just to explain how it all goes together to help the builder on site communicate to his team.
We're talking very much about some of the stuff that you're doing, but how as clients can we help you as well?
I think a good brief, we usually start with a good brief. So when we form contract documents, when we have appointments, we always integrate the brief into the appointment documents. But it's a set discipline of writing down everything that you want. And then from that baseline, it's just always good to have that starting point. So the more you think about it to start off with, the better. And then in terms of changes on site, I think some of the dangers are when you communicate with the builder and don't include the architect or the consultant. So you really got to be disciplined and maybe talk to, I think if the architect's got a role on site, because usually we do just up to the pre-site commencement design works, and we can be on the end of a phone for advice. But if you're on site, that's when dangers can, you've really got to keep that communication line between yourself and the project manager or the architect. So it's got to be a hierarchy.
Because there is a line here, isn't there, between, we talked about it a little bit, that you have these meetings where you drag everyone in and it all goes wrong, and then the other extreme where someone's missing out. So how are you drawing that line, or is it almost on a contractual basis, as you say, that you take it to a certain point and then it's handing it over?
I think usually there'll just be roles and responsibilities that you can set out. So if we did go for a traditional procurement route where an architect administrates works on site, then there's a role and responsibilities where the architect is a project manager and administrates a contract. So everything has to go through them. And then it goes down to the contractor. So it's just this, you just need a little flow diagram of who's doing what if it gets to be as complex as that. I think we've kept ours really simple because Mike, our contractor, has formed a direct contract between him and the client. And usually, because we've worked it all out beforehand, there aren't really a lot of changes. I think most things are just sorted out, and we haven't really had any changes on site apart from some people moving the building on site, but it's all worked out because there are contracts in place. So that's the way to do it. Yeah.
Because although we've mentioned team a couple of times, you're all working separately, aren't you?
Yeah, it's an informal arrangement. We work together, we share information, everything's very open in terms of whether it's fees or whatever. But yeah, we're all independently employed, self-employed, or whatever our arrangements are. I was just thinking one thing with the bit about what Charles was saying before. One of the things is, again, back to trust and responsibility. So when Mike's doing the contractor doing the building, we're kind of trusting them to know how to do it. They've come to us if they're not sure. So they've got a responsibility. If they're not sure about a change, whether it matters, they know, and they'll get back in touch and say, is it okay if I do this? Does that matter? So they have, because we can't, no architect can be on site enough to spot all the things that could possibly go wrong. It would just cost the client too much. So there has to be a sort of, this kind of a training the person doing stuff and a feedback process. So I think that's important. So you're not having to be on site that much, but in effect you are, because the contractor's seeing problems through the eyes of the rest of the team, and they'll get in touch if they think something needs doing.
Is there anything that we need to think about when we're looking at budgets?
Yeah, and I think we always start with the budget. I mean, I know some projects you draw the thing and then go out to tender and find out what it costs and then decide if you can afford it. So the first question we ask is, what do you want to spend? And that needs some unpicking, because sometimes a client will sort of give a lower number because they're sort of almost like you're bargaining for something. And you think, I won't let people know how much money I've really got. And then the danger is then you design for that lower budget and they're disappointed because they haven't got all these things they had in their mind, but you haven't put them in because they couldn't afford it. Then suddenly there's more money available and it wastes a lot of time. And so it has to be a bit of a trust and a real honesty about what you really want to spend, because if once the budget's fixed, then you've got to trade things. You can have that, but you can't have that. And the client can choose, do you want to spend your money on this or do you want to spend the money on that? So I think the budget's really key, and just honesty and transparency. And again, talking with the builder very early on, we can get some realistic ideas about things. Say, well, you've done this before. Was that roughly what will that cost if we do it that way? And we can start. We don't put anything in the design that we have to take out later, hopefully. So we're not stripping out all the nice stuff at the end. It's the value engineering thing we talked about before.
So we get through the project, and then you're at this stage, I suppose. Typically, we might not see the contractors again afterwards, but tell us about how it's different when you've got this integrated team and how you look back at the projects.
Well, integrating a team, but I'm including the client within that team. So after the builder's left and everything's finished. So if we get through we've finished this recent retrofit in Monmouth in 2015. So we've just gone back today and we've just been checking on the whole performance through the heating season and also through part of the cooling season. So we're learning what they've been doing with their house and how they're adjusting to their controls and using things like log burners along with the MVHR. So it's just because I've been in there for a year, they've got to a point where they're getting used to the control systems, maybe slightly not using it to its full potential. So it doesn't take a long time because everything's in place. So it's just simple adjustments and maybe just chatting through how you open a window at night or two windows and just thinking through how it all works as an environmental for the best environmental internal comfort. So I think that's less to do with the contractor unless there's something going on which is unusual. We're going to get any problems with this superstructure or internal fixtures and fittings. We haven't had any of that sort of thing so far. But usually it's just about fine tuning and getting the buildings as efficient and as comfortable as possible.
Nick, do you have anything to add in terms of things that you've learned afterwards that you then can plough into the next project? I know you're very big on refining things.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, obviously you've got to be fairly confident. I mean, often you just hope that the phone doesn't ring again once you left the project. I'm not saying that's our approach, but by building on what we know, we're very confident we can go back. And if there is a problem, we want to know about it because we don't want to be you lose money on going back and fixing stuff. So today, part of the problem is they were so comfy and so happy. We were kind of probing them and pushing them to say, there must be something that we can improve, surely something, some way of, operating. So we suggested a few things they could do simpler. And then in the end, the only thing they could think of was some downpipe clips were loose. And we just gave them a tap with a hammer and said they should be fine. But yeah, that was kind of it. So we were looking for problems, which is unusual, I think. But you can only do that if you're confident there won't be too many problems.
Well, maybe we'll round this off then and just look at someone who's going into a self-build project, looking to build up that team. You've given us lots of tips. Is there anything else that they should bear in mind, particularly at that early stage? Because I think once you've got that team together, there's not much that's going to change. You're just working together from that phase.
Well, I don't know if it's going off the subject, but pre-application planning advice, I'd definitely get that as soon as you can, because just having the planners on board as part of your integrated team, and also the building control officer, we get all the local authorities involved very early on as well. So I think that really does help for successful projects. And it's just if you do pre-app processes, you can get all the issues about highways, surveys, ecological surveys. It's just successful projects. You just need everybody up front from the very start. It costs a bit more, I suppose. There'd be a little bit of outlay in terms of pre-apps, but it's just the investment's just worthwhile, I think.
Yeah, just as Charles was saying that, I was just thinking of one of the rural, the ideal thing sustainably is to be building in towns and cities and so on. And here we are in the country, because that's where we could get planning permission. And I don't know where you'll end up, but again, plots are really tricky. And the rural thing often is the drainage can be a big problem if you're on heavy clay soil and so on. And again, that you've got to be really careful you're not buying a plot where you don't have a possibility for drainage. And I've seen that happen. So that's something that comes in with the pre-app advice and the initial surveys and checking floodplains, all that sort of stuff. Very important when you're dewy-eyed about looking for your ideal plot. It's easy to sort of not want to know bad news.
Get that bad news out of the way at the very start, because that's if it drags on. Things like highways issues they're non-negotiable. You're stuffed, so you've got to get that sorted. All the horrible things. Then you can concentrate on the nice bits.
Well, thank you very much for all your information today. Really appreciate that.
Cheers. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Head online to take a look at the show notes for this one. They're at houseplanninghelp.com/138, where you can review the key points. We've made some notes for you. Also, if you've got a comment or you'd like to ask a question, you can do that at the bottom. And we'll link you to Dempsey DeCourcy Architects, to Elemental Solutions. We've also got Nick and Charles on Twitter, all at houseplanninghelp.com/138. Hope you enjoyed that one. Slightly different announcement about the hub this week, and that is because we're looking for our next self-build project to follow. We'd love it to be a passive house. We've got a few irons in the fire. As of yet, we haven't quite signed anything up. What we're really looking for is a win-win-win situation. So we get something at House Planning Help that's going to be useful. Whoever the client is, it's perhaps something that they're looking to get some publicity for the project that they're on, and it also helps the businesses who are engaged in this. So the win-win-win arrangement is what I'm looking for, and I'm not quite sure I've got there yet. Hopefully soon we can start off on another project. Let's explain the situation from scratch. So what I'm trying to do in the hub is to build up our case studies, whether it's different construction types or different scenarios, perhaps an infill in a city, or we're just looking for experience. If you think of grand designs, yes, that tells the story. It doesn't tell us much about the decisions that are being made. So we want to learn from those as we go along. And Alex Baines at Long Barrett has been great to just let the project open up and explain why certain decisions have been made. So that's what we're hoping for our next one. We probably don't want insulated concrete formwork. We'll be looking for timber frame, for brick and block, just a new build project that's being built to Passive House standard. That's what we're after. And we're hoping to get some value out of that by following it from the very, very beginning, understanding why the designs evolved to where they have, right through construction, and then just seeing what we've learned along the way. We break it down into short episodes that we try and release one a month. And so that's the idea behind it, really. So if this does sound like something that you think, well, we might have a project that's suitable, then maybe you can get in touch through the website, houseplanninghelp.com. What I'm going to do is just put it into today's show notes. So this was episode 138. Just thought it's worth a try because Alex actually came through this podcast and he was exactly the type of person that, really enthusiastic about working with us and collaborating at House Planning Help. So houseplanninghelp.com/138. We're at the end again. Next time, Thomas Gartner from Gale and Snowdon is my guest, and we're going to be looking at building biology, getting an overview of that. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.